The idea of going to smaller and smaller volumes of blood in particular is intriguing because, to be honest, giving blood and getting a blood sample hurts. Theranos did a lot of things wrong, but the one thing they were right about is people don't want to give more blood than they need to know what's going on within themselves.
Welcome to the Medical Device Innovators Podcast. On this podcast, we explore ways to accelerate development and get your medical devices to market faster and more efficiently. We engage with industry professionals that are changing the game and talk through the processes and challenges shaping medical device development in the current day and age, with ever-shortening timelines and budgets. This episode is brought to you by System Insight Engineering, a leading innovator in leveraging computational modeling and simulation to reduce time and cost in getting medical devices to market through insightful design decisions, data to support regulatory approval, and clarifying understanding into device performance. System Insight Engineering helps you to better your bottom line so you can help more people faster. Find out more at siesimulation.com. Here's your host, Arlen Ward.
Welcome to another episode of the Medical Device Innovators Podcast. I am Arlen Ward, and with me today is Chris Strohsahl from Drummond Scientific Company. And we're going to talk a bit about how he got where he's at today and his journey through life sciences and medical devices, what Drummond does, and we'll spend a bit of time on lessons learned over the years as well. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Arlen. It's great to be here.
So first up, what do you do? Where are you at with Drummond as far as what is your position and what goes on?
So I am, as of last year, the president of Drummond Scientific. We are an entirely family-owned contract manufacturer located in southeastern Pennsylvania. Your listeners will probably most likely know us, if they know us at all, for the pipette aid, which is a device that was invented about 50 years ago here and revolutionized lab liquid handling and obviated the need for people to mouth pipette potentially dangerous solutions. In fact, it was the inventor noticing his wife, then girlfriend, soon to be wife, mouth pipetting that led him to develop the first pipette aid and really create that market. That said, what we do more of and what we're most proud of is mass manufacturing medically relevant consumable devices. So that starts with devices that collect microliter volumes of biological specimen. If you've ever had your finger stuck at a doctor's office, we more than likely made that capillary tube. We make hundreds of millions to billions of them a year. We have recently moved our focus beyond just capillary tubes and into all consumable medical devices. We looked at LFA assembly and it developed a nice capacity there in response to COVID, and are continuing to grow that out. And we're moving that even further beyond lateral flow to all consumable diagnostic devices.
Okay, so is your background in engineering, or how did you end up in this position?
No, I'm a scientist by training. I was always interested in medicine, going back to watching ER in the early 90s. As my education progressed, I got less and less enthused with the idea of working with patients and more interested in the science and the development of technologies, whether it be therapeutic or diagnostic, that could help progress medicine. In graduate school, I ended up studying the interaction of oligonucleotides at a surface, which is a fancy way of studying biosensors. And so that very seamlessly transitioned into starting a company directly after / a little bit during graduate school. That went the way of a lot of startups. It failed. And there are a lot of reasons for that, most importantly of lack of experience. I was a bit of a hotshot recent graduate, and I thought I knew everything and I knew nothing. We lacked the ability to gain a lot of meaningful funding, and our timing was bad. We went to do our first Series A raise on or about the day Lehman Brothers collapsed in 2008. So money was hard to get anyway. It was really hard to get for a novice entrepreneur. But one of the things I took from that is also there's a valley of death when it comes to diagnostic and med device developing. And it's very easy, or I shouldn't say easy, but there's a lot of options to get one or two prototypes made. They're expensive, but you can do it and you know where to go. And there's also a lot of options to get hundreds of thousands, millions, billions of things made. People love those types of projects. But in between, it's really, really difficult. And for someone who's developing a consumable device, that's what you need. And that really planted the seed towards moving into an area like Drummond. I didn't necessarily have Drummond pegged, but it's something that I wanted to do because I really enjoyed the idea of making things. And it turns out I even more like the idea of helping others make companies who make things. So I did a lot of consulting and eventually crossed paths with Drummond. And there was a nice Venn overlap there. I had a network of people who were making devices in the diagnostic and life sciences world. Drummond was looking to augment their very established and mature business line with new product avenues and new opportunities to scale devices. And so I started out as a consultant, came on a few years later as director of venture new product development, and then scaled there to now the president.
All right. Wow. It's kind of interesting that you started off in grad school probably using the same pipette aid.
I did. Goes back to my undergrad, and it was eye-opening because you never really think about where things are made when you're using them. And to know that it was made, I grew up in upstate New York, and my mother's from Philadelphia, and to know that, that was made entirely, literally 5 miles where she grew up, it's kind of ironic. It's very neat when things like that come full circle.
Yeah, we could spend a whole nother podcast talking about lessons learned from starting companies because, there's a lot around that I've found out on my own.
It is the best and most painful education you can ever get.
Yes. Yeah. Learned a ton along the way. But now you're really looking to grow the side of the business that works on developing new lines in terms of manufacturing for other folks. What kind of other companies are you targeting?
So in general, who we like to work with is great people. And I know everyone says that, but we really mean it here. And it bears out in our customers. We don't have problem customers. Everyone we work with, it's a joy to work with. Historically, our customer base have been, the best of the largest diagnostic companies in the world. I won't name names, but any one of them, if I said that, you would recognize it and they're in the news on a regular basis. For new business development, who we are generally working with are three things. They are alumni of those companies who have decided to spin out and start their own technologies. They are professors who are at the earliest stage of developing technologies. And then in between, you have the people, honestly, like who I was. They're young, early entrepreneurs who have a really good idea and have a product that can potentially make a dramatic impact to the world and lack the either finances or experience to go forward on their own. Even more generally, Drummond looks for customers who are making products that create or save lives. Those are the two general areas we focus. Our products are primarily in vitro diagnostics and in vitro fertilization. And that in and of itself makes coming to work a joy because, it's conscious capitalism. Every cent we make is doing good in the world.
Yeah, which is hugely important. Especially as you get to tough times and things like that, to be able to look back and see what the impact of what you're doing is and really have a lot of meaning behind it. I think that's a big part of doing business today, is having that kind of an impact for sure. So is it primarily fluid handling of biologicals and small sample sizes? Is that the technology space that you focus on developing new products with new clients, or is it wider than that?
Historically, and up until the last couple of years, I would say absolutely. That's our bread and butter. The smaller the volume, the more precise you need that collection capability, the more value add you need to what would normally be a commodity product, the more it's in our wheelhouse. So a 75 millimeter piece of glass tubing with nothing in it, not really interested in that. You want 5 microliters, 10 microliters with a 1% or less tolerance that's treated with heparin or EDTA and plugged to provide even better volume or dispensing capabilities. Now we get more interested. And we've seen that in the market, that the idea of going to smaller and smaller volumes of blood in particular is intriguing because, let's be honest, giving blood and getting a blood sample hurts. Theranos did a lot of things wrong, but the one thing they were right about is people don't want to give more blood than they need to know what's going on within themselves. And in the crater that they left, we're starting to see a lot of companies, big and small, fill into that and start to carve off chunks of what they were trying to do as a whole, which we know now is just not possible.
Right. Yeah. They kind of cast a wide net, but I imagine that if you focus that, you can fulfill that patient wish of smaller samples and things like that.
They proved to the market, people wanted this. People wanted Theranos to be correct. There's no question about that. But the science didn't bear out.
You got to be able to deliver at the end of the day. Right. Yes, for sure. So it primarily, in that fluid handling space, I imagine a lot of this is automated as well in the manufacturing lines that you put together for these companies.
Drummond is relatively unique in the contract manufacturing space in that we're entirely vertically integrated. So we design our machines, we build our machines, and we run our machines, which ultimately gives our customers a couple of things. One, the ability to be very responsive to unique challenges, and we can customize solutions for them. And then two, we don't have a lot of downtime because the engineer who designed the machine is sitting one room over, and if there's an issue, they fix it. We don't have to wait days or weeks for people to come out. And so that allows for a lot of efficiency and then just continuous improvement. Because the other aspect is engineers don't stop being engineers once they've finished, quote unquote, a product. And so they're constantly seeing the machines run and seeing how they can get 5, 10, 15% more with a couple of tweaks. So that allows us to continuously up the efficiency of our production and provide our customers with higher quality product more rapidly. It also has given us a lot of experience when you deal with making hundreds of millions and billions of pieces of very small, fragile glass. That translates well into automated assembly of more robust materials. So when you start thinking about first lateral flow assay development and then going beyond that into microfluidic device assembly, we can take a lot of those lessons, a lot of the techniques we use for feeding glass onto a manufacturing line and use that the same way to feed plastic parts with a lot of quick turnover because quite simply you can be rougher with them.
You touched on microfluidics and the simulation world where I work. There's a lot of effort these days to do a lot of modeling of microfluidic devices, looking at valving and mixing and all sorts of things along those lines. Are these devices getting more and more complicated, based on what you're seeing as trends in the industry?
What we're seeing is it's actually the opposite. They're going to less complicated and simpler just because it, at least in the world where we are in the diagnostics, they're designed to be disposable and simplifying the core detection technology, whether it's antibody-based or DNA-based. There's numerous types of DNA-based amplifications available that don't need the thermal cycling that you used to have to do with PCR. So they can be done quickly. They can be done with a much simpler device. So at least with the customers that we work with, and again, this is probably biased based on who we work with and what my network is, but we are definitely seeing a drive towards simpler.
I can imagine that drives the cost down as well, because if you go from something that has 5 steps and it goes down to 2 or even 1, that, the manufacturing is a lot simpler and
Manufacturing is simpler. And with respect to steps, every step that a test has is an opportunity for a human to mess it up. I think we saw during COVID a couple of things that both changed and in some cases strengthened paradigms. The one is we are pretty capable of doing fairly challenging tests on a whole. That said, there are still always going to be a percentage of people who mess those things up if there's too many steps. And making something simple and accessible is challenging, especially when you start to think about, the people on the margins. And so the more you can automate the process of getting a result, and that comes from getting the sample from the patient to the test and then having a very unambiguous result come out, the better. And that's another area where Drummond likes to focus is the simplification of the sample collection and transfer, whether that be integrating the sample collection into the device or creating lower step processes for processing the sample after it's collected and before it's introduced to the test.
So this sounds like a lot of people must be coming to you with, this is a process that we want done on a microfluidic level, but they may not know the technology well enough. And that Drummond Scientific is really the company that does a lot of the, well, here's the methods that are used in order to clean things up or how to simplify steps or move fluids around in a reliable manner. Or does everyone come to you with more expertise than I'm really giving them credit for?
It depends on the area. We are not experts in assay development. I did it 20 years ago and maybe then was an expert, but that certainly has passed me by significantly. So with respect to the test itself, we end up asking a lot of questions. How does it work? What are the absolute areas that we cannot impinge on or it'll distort the test? Why do you need certain anticoagulant treatments? Why don't you? Why do you need plasma versus whole blood? All this. We don't have expertise there and we don't pretend to. Our customers are the experts in that area. Our expertise is really in two things: collecting the sample, delivering the sample, and then making a lot of whatever the product it is.
Which are, both key areas for sure that I imagine that is an expertise that's lacking for most of the clients.
Expertise and or experience.
Yeah.
It's debatable as to which is actually the driving factor there. But regardless, we do often see mistakes made early on in design of product. I can't even necessarily call them mistakes. It's not a mistake if you don't know any better. That if they were avoided, would significantly smooth the process and transition from a lab benchtop device to something that could scale commercially. And that's really why we always try to stress to anyone we're talking to, even if they just have the nucleus of an idea, is talk to us as early as possible. We thrive on those early engagements because we hate when someone comes to us with something that's already developed. And even if we're talking about a sampling device and they're expecting something to cost 2 cents and we tell them it's going to cost a quarter because of one or two very simple decisions that they went left and had they gone right would have changed everything.
Yeah. So I'm starting to get a feel for what the ideal groups that you work with. Starts way back when you mentioned start with good people with an idea and you want to meet up with them early. What other advice do you have beyond those two as far as at what point should somebody be reaching out to discuss manufacturability of their product?
Well, certainly if you have a prototype already and you have not invested a lot of money in molds, have not gone down the path of proof of concept, and please, before you've gone down a regulatory path, those are best. But a lot of it can just be, again, the nascent idea that, hey, I've got a problem or there is a problem and I want to solve it. And these are the general ideas of how I would target it and which is going to be the most cost effective for me to do that. We're absolutely happy to have those conversations as well.
Okay. And these stages that they're in, I mean, it sounds like you really are looking for people that are very, very early stage in their concept development?
Not exclusively. Again, we'll talk with anyone, and our customer portfolio bears that out. We deal with literally every stage of product development, from just barely out of the mind of an innovative professor at a university to products that have been on the market for 30 years. And that's not even an exaggeration. A lot of the products we make are sticky. Our customer acquisition cost can be a bit high, but we try to be the type of partner that allows our customers to stay with us for the length of the product and work with them to make sure that that product stays viable for decades.
Nice. Okay. And what advice would you have for somebody that has an idea that involves fluid transfer, fluid capture at some point, if they're trying to get started in this space and maybe don't know a lot about it? What are some major things for them to tick off?
So the first thing is you needed to figure out how important the tolerance of the volume and what the volume you're looking for is. Are you doing a truly quantitative test where you need truly quantitative input? Okay, that's fantastic, but that's going to be the most expensive and the hardest to get to. Can you get away with something that's more of a gross volume collection device? It's going to be cheaper and it's going to be easier. What type of processing do you need for the sample? If you're talking blood, which is our most experienced medium, whole blood versus plasma, hugely different in terms of the diagnostic processes that you're capable to do. Simple to turn one into the other in a lab. Getting plasma from a whole blood sample is not difficult in a lab. In a non-lab setting, it's relatively challenging to impossible. That's certainly an area we've worked with universities in terms of looking at opportunities to separate blood cells from the plasma without the need for a centrifuge, and something that can be done in the field. So once you narrow down those questions, then I would say reach out to us as soon as possible. And we're happy to have those conversations. And it can be before then, but if it's before then, those are going to be the first questions we ask you. So why not just cut to the chase?
And how would they get a hold of you? What are the best ways to?
Emails, LinkedIn. I'm constantly online, as the saying is now. So Twitter, info@Drummond is probably the best way. So info@drummondsci.com. They can direct you either to me or to our biz dev group or directly to our engineers. We are a nicely sized company in that we are large enough to handle the manufacturing needs of some of the largest companies in the world, but still small enough that we are nimble and willing to be very flexible in our business and engagement models with companies.
Nice. Okay. Well, thanks very much for the conversation. Certainly an area that the devices I've been involved in have not involved a whole lot of fluid handling. So, it's certainly an area that I learned about. Going simpler versus more complex is the way to get these devices working, which certainly makes sense when it's said, right? There's a lot of things about the perspective, I think, that people could gain from working with someone that's been in that space for a while.
No, absolutely. The cheapest way to learn is from someone else's mistakes. And Drummond's made some, I've made a lot. So we're happy to share that intelligence whenever we can.
Nice. Okay. Well, we'll certainly have the contact information in the show notes at the end, and appreciate you coming on. And thanks for filling us in about Drummond Scientific.
Absolutely, Arnold. It's my pleasure. Thanks for talking to me.
Thank you for listening to the Medical Device Innovators podcast, powered by System Insight Engineering. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave a 5-star review and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. This episode is brought to you by System Insight Engineering, a leading innovator in leveraging computational modeling and simulation to reduce time and cost in getting medical devices to market through insightful design decisions, data to support regulatory approval, and clarifying understanding into device performance. System Insight Engineering helps you to better your bottom line so you can help more people faster. Find out more at SIEsimulation.com.